I studied fine arts a long time ago, and that was a sort of broad fine arts education, not specifically not medium specific, but I was interested in photography, working with photography. Over the next little while, I guess I explored photography in a fairly traditional, conventional sense, in that representational kind of way, and there was a bit of a gap, 5-year gap, where I didn't exhibit, and then I sort of came back, coinciding with a move to Melbourne, sort of reintroduced myself to the art world and sort of started to embrace photography in a more active way. But it wasn't until probably 2010 where I introduced a process within an exhibition called Wordless, which was at C3, where I rephotographed a photograph, and that was I guess that was motivated by the concerns of the exhibition, which was considering or reflecting on my upbringing as a Christian kid, son of missionaries, and the influence of religion, good and bad, and the legacy of that then, which no longer being a person of faith, and I guess so working out ways that photography could be used to explore those kind of ideas. And I guess for the most part the exhibition was a fairly representational one. It was images of something that was symbolic to a time in my life or an experience. But then there was there was 4 photographs which I took. They were of clouds, so skyscapes, that I rephotographed. So the motivation there was thinking about the heavens, and the heavens as a construct, or heaven as a construct. And so the process of rephotographing drew attention to the fact that the photograph was a photograph. That was the first time that I really considered the materiality of photography as a way to explore those ideas. And so that sort of set the scene, I guess, for the next, 7 years. And that concern for photographic materiality as a way to think through ideas has become more and more important. So I guess that kind of frames my practice leading up to recent times. Now I guess the concern is still around the process of photography, but less about the mechanics well, actually no, that's not quite true. I'm interested in the process of making photographs, but what the process of imaging the world means. So representation and representationalism, the idea that the world is there to be represented, or represented to us, and our knowledge of the world is only through representations. So, and that doesn't necessarily mean just images. That can be science. Science knows the world through representation. Law, politics, all these things work through representation, and they work to a system of representationalism, this separation of humans from the world. Photography is, I guess, for me, quite a literal but really metaphorically kind of interesting way to work through representationalism. So the interest in representation, the interest in photography is sort of culminated in the current work, which is very specifically located in exploring photographic representation and the implications that has for representationalism. I guess this particular exhibition came from the work I've been doing over the last couple of years that is part of the Masters at VCA. So there's a specific research question that's driving this, and again it's located in photographic representation, but it is more specifically, can a photograph or how can a photograph resist its own representational nature or structure? So the exhibition is called the Insufficient Photograph. The four photographs that made up this exhibition, all of them in one way or another are insufficient. They don't give you the photographic outcome that conventional photography would. So they don't give you a representation that is located beyond the photograph that you're looking at. So individually they all are insufficient, but what I'm hoping would occur when someone goes in and experiences the exhibition is the effects of those differences between the work, rather than, so if the viewer approaches a photograph, if they're resisted, if the photograph resists their desire for a photographic outcome, a representation that is located beyond the frame, if that's resisted, then the viewer will be present within the exhibition itself and will instead look across all the group of photographs and then perhaps map the effects of their difference. Broadly speaking, it's about reworking representations. It's about multiple positions rather than singular position, and it's about interruption. But I've used the idea of reworking representations. If we know the world through our representations, that doesn't mean that they are fixed. They are in a constant state of becoming, to use Karen Baroud's terms. So I rephotograph, I rework, I overlay things together. So all of these different processes that I've developed based on her methodology are designed to disrupt photographic representation, so that the photograph that you see, although it is still a photograph, it's still created through photographic means, it disrupts the viewer's desire for a representational outcome. And in that sense, the photograph could be called insufficient. The effects of difference and the disruption to photographic representation has two sides to it. So one is in the making of the photograph. So the studio-based techniques that I've developed based on this methodology work towards creating photographs that are insufficient. But then the experience of the photograph within the gallery also needs to resist photographic representation. The gallery itself is a system of representationalism. It's designed for us to observe and know through representations that are before us. It's a classic system of representation. So there's no point making a photograph that resists representation and then put it in a representational space, because it's going to operate in the same way. So the exhibition as a whole needs to also work towards the same goal. So in that sense, the experience of the work is really important. So the group of photographs for me needed to be seen together. So the way that they were displayed on the wall, you see them as soon as you enter the space, you see them as a group. You can see them all together at once, and you can see them individually. But so much of it relies on the experience of the viewer, and that I don't know. So perhaps there's ways that I could explore in the future, ways to actually map the experience of the viewer in engaging with this work, because I can set up a premise. I've set up an apparatus in a way, where the viewer becomes a key participant, but the knowledge that's created by that apparatus resides in the viewer, and that's untapped for me. Maybe I can just be generous and say they can have their experience and leave, but it would be really interesting for me to know more about how people experience the work. I guess the outcome of this research has been practical in the sense of made work, but what is more interesting, I guess, for me is a methodology. What's interesting then is to apply that methodology to other projects. One example is something that's coming up really soon. I'm part of a commission at the Town Hall Gallery in Hawthorn, where they asked artists to respond to their permanent collection. So that allowed me to use existing representations and to rework them using the methodology and the techniques that I've devised. So that's been really exciting because the work's made and it will be exhibited in a couple of weeks, but the methodology worked in a sense. Like, I was able to interrupt some chosen images from their permanent collection and disrupt the individual representations, but by doing so draw attention to the choices that have been made to develop this archive of work. So the choices that a council makes or a local government makes, or even any gallery or anywhere that creates a collection, we know the world through the apparatus we set up. So we know the world through the collections of representations that we build. And this gallery has set up an archive of work over the last 100 years that very specifically creates a representation of the society or community that they're based in. And when you look at the collection as a whole, questions come to mind, particularly around representations of gender and representations of power. So without making any definitive statements, by disrupting some of those representations, you can highlight some of those choices that have been made.